Hi, and welcome to another episode of The Lowest Crime, a podcast about true crime cases that happened in one of the lowest countries in the world, the Netherlands. I am Elzeline, and in today's episode we will take a look at the tragic case of Elzeline K, a seemingly loving 64-year-old mother and wife who one night did the unthinkable. She grabbed an axe and killed both her husband and daughter. How could a devoted wife and caring mother be driven to such a horrific act? Before we start, please be advised that today's episode contains details about violence, mental health problems, and attempted suicide that some listeners may find disturbing. And although I strive to bring you all the known facts, I am still just an amateur podcast creator, and there is always a chance of me making an error. So, let's dive in. In the early hours of September 5th, 2008, in the quiet village of Bad Hoeverdorp, emergency services received a chilling phone call. Elzeline K, who lived in a luxurious villa with her 61-year-old husband Cyril and their 22-year-old daughter Daphne, calmly informed them that she had just killed her family. When the police arrived, they found a gruesome scene. Cyril and Daphne lay in their beds, their heads brutally struck multiple times with the blunt side of an axe. Scattered around the house were little goodbye notes, saying things like, "My depression has become a hell. I have to spare the two that I loved the most. They would never survive this." And, "Your mother has become insane." Since Elzeline had called the emergency services, it was immediately clear who was responsible. However, when they arrived at the scene, Elzeline was nowhere to be found. Shortly after, a car drove full speed into a tree on the Elzeleen in Overveen. Later, an officer saw a bloodied woman stumble out of the car. Elzeline. Elzeline lived with her 61-year-old husband Cyril, a retired KLM pilot, and her daughter Daphne, who was a law student. They lived in a beautiful villa in Bad Hoeverdorp. Elzeline and Cyril had met each other in 1977 when Elzeline was a stewardess and Cyril worked as a pilot for Pakistan International Airways. Friends described Elzeline as a perfectionist, intelligent, and a well-put-together mother and wife. She impressively juggled working as a stewardess while also taking care of her family. Her house was always immaculate, and with an eye for detail, her friends said that she could make the most beautiful flower arrangements. Cyril, on the other hand, was a very sweet man, but a bit eccentric, enjoying bridge, chess, and tennis. And at that point in time, he worked as a volunteer at a tennis association in Bad Hoeverdorp. Their daughter Daphne, a law student, was cheerful and enterprising with broad interests, including gaming on her computer. She had always had a good relationship with her parents. Elzeline felt very close to her daughter, stating, "I knew everything about her." The family was described by those who knew them as warm, loving, and cozy. In 1998, the family experienced their first traumatic event, when their 17-year-old son Jamie died suddenly in a traffic accident. Jamie's death hit like a sledgehammer, severely disrupting the family. Each member dealt with the grief differently. For Elzeline, it became impossible to continue working as a stewardess due to the long hours and distant flights. She wanted to stay close to home. Cyril, on the other hand, wanted to keep flying as a distraction, but he was sadly disqualified by KLM and forced to end his career as a pilot. Elzeline, naturally a meticulous organizer, became even more concerned about Cyril and Daphne. Years later, it seemed to the outside world that the family had been able to pick up their lives as much as possible. However, more was going on behind closed doors. The marriage was not without problems. There were tensions between the calm, religious Cyril and the strong-willed Elzeline. In 2008, the couple decided to go to therapy for a while after Cyril allegedly hit her during an argument. Shortly after, Elzeline developed severe headaches and was diagnosed with a small brain hemorrhage. It is unclear whether the hemorrhage was due to the fight she had with Cyril or if it had a different cause. Around that time, Elzeline confided to a few close friends that she was not doing well at all, and that she was suffering from a severe depression. Elzeline's mental health had been deteriorating for years. Her struggle with depression started in 1996, for which she was treated with medication. This was just after Jamie passed away. Elzeline did not like talking about her struggles with mental health. It was something that she would rather keep to herself. However, her depression severely impacted her daily life and functioning, making even the simplest tasks seem insurmountable. Elzeline started sleeping poorly and began to think about suicide. For her, it was often the small daily problems that caused her significant stress. In the time leading up to the murders, she was extremely stressed about seemingly irrelevant things, such as algae forming in the pond and paintwork that was done at the house that she said she was unhappy about. And also Daphne's computer, whose video card kept overheating and required constant repair from a friend. In the months leading up to the murders, friends and family urged Elzeline to seek help. She went to the doctor and was prescribed paroxetine by a substitute GP, as her own GP was on vacation at the time. Paroxetine is a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, SSRI, used to treat depression and anxiety. She had successfully taken it before, but had also experienced pretty severe side effects, such as memory problems and extreme anxiety. The substitute GP prescribed 20 milligrams of paroxetine. However, Elzeline initially did not take the medication. It didn't feel right. She preferred to wait for her own GP to get back from vacation to talk things over. It's also possible she didn't take the medication due to an increased sense of paranoia, with a friend mentioning that Elzeline felt like the police were listening in on her phone conversations. When she later visited her regular GP, the dosage was increased to 40 milligrams, as the doctor was under the impression that she had taken the previously prescribed 20 milligrams without effect. In her desperation to feel better, Elzeline took more than prescribed, totaling 60 milligrams, likely worsening her symptoms and contributing to her mental instability. On September 5th, 2008, just after midnight, Elzeline picked up Daphne from Schiphol station. In the car, Daphne immediately asked if Elzeline had gone to seek psychological help. Elzeline had to admit that she had only received medication and had not gone to find somebody to talk to. This made Daphne very angry, as Elzeline had promised her that she would. She also became upset with her father Cyril for failing to ensure Elzeline sought help. This conflict created an unusually tense atmosphere in the house. After Cyril and Daphne went to bed, Elzeline, feeling down and sad, smoked a cigarette in the garden, a secret habit because Cyril was strongly against smoking. She also had a Baileys, which was unusual for her, as she rarely drank alcohol at all. Sitting on the living room couch, she was suddenly overwhelmed by an unbearable feeling that she could no longer go on living. Simultaneously, she felt she couldn't leave Cyril and Daphne to suffer the grief of her suicide, knowing herself what it is like to lose a son, Jamie. Overwhelmed by these thoughts, Elzeline decided she needed to take them with her. So she used the first item that came to mind, an axe that she used so often in the garden. She went to the shed, grabbed the axe, and first went to the bedroom where her husband was sleeping. She struck him with the blunt side of the axe until he was no longer breathing. She later stated that she had hoped it would be over with just one blow, but she was distressed when she had to strike him multiple times, and she felt guilty when she heard him suffering. She then went to Daphne's room and did the same. After the murders, Elzeline drove to an apartment building in Haarlem where she and Cyril had once lived, intending to jump off the roof. Finding that the door was locked, she drove her car at full speed into a tree. Police later found her, bloodied, in the bushes. In her pocket was a letter to the student loan agency, informing them that her daughter had been killed and was no longer in need of a student loan. Even in her state of mental turmoil, Elzeline exhibited a paradoxical concern for practical matters. The fact that she left behind notes, meticulously detailing arrangements for mundane tasks, showed a glimpse into her fragmented state of mind. She later stated that she could remember committing the murders well, but she had no recollection of writing the notes. Elzeline's trial started in 2009. A great topic of discussion during the trial was whether or not she could be held responsible for the murders. Had she been fully aware of her actions, or were they solely due to the depression and the medication use? Her case became a focal point for discussion about mental health and the effects of medication on behavior. The court considered the influence of the medication she was on. Paroxetine is known to initially make patients feel more depressed before the medication starts to work. It alleviates lethargy and lack of motivation, which can paradoxically increase the risk of suicidal thoughts and actions. It was later revealed that Elzeline was not just depressed, but suffered from bipolar disorder. And administering antidepressants like paroxetine to bipolar patients carries a significant risk of inducing mania. Dr. Anton Lohnen, a clinical pharmacologist, also suggested that the brain hemorrhage might have made Elzeline more susceptible to the effects of paroxetine, leading to her mental breakdown. During the trial, Elzeline's mental state continued to deteriorate, leading to psychotic symptoms during the proceedings. Elzeline was initially unwilling to stop taking paroxetine, partly out of fear of being confronted with what she had done. Her defense attorney had to convince her to switch from paroxetine to lithium, which significantly improved her condition, returning her to her former composed self. This transformation truly highlighted how detrimental paroxetine had been for her. During the trial, Elzeline expressed deep remorse and confusion about her actions. She stated, "How can I make you understand what I cannot comprehend myself? What went wrong in my head on that fatal night remains an unbelievable mystery. It felt like my brain was gonna explode and I couldn't go on living. That I impulsively decided to take the lives of my dear husband and daughter, whom I absolutely adored, is incomprehensible. They were everything to me. I have nothing to lose and nothing to hide, nor am I seeking something I have no right to. No matter your judgment, I have a life sentence, because I have lost them forever." Elzeline was found guilty, but deemed to have diminished responsibility due to her mental state. She was sentenced to 7 years in prison. Elzeline's story shows the importance of seeking help, and the potential consequences when mental health is ignored. Her story is a tragic example of how untreated mental health problems and the improper use of medication can lead to devastating consequences. It emphasizes the need for openness and a greater awareness of mental health problems, as well as the importance of supporting those struggling with their mental health. If you or someone you know is struggling with their mental health, please seek professional help. Thank you so much for listening to The Lowest Crime. Be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Also, don't forget to follow this podcast on Instagram to find all images related to the case. I look forward to seeing you in the next one.